Hi everyone, welcome to our lecture this week. This week we've got Tim, who amongst other things is the founder of the structural exam. But I'm going to pass over to Reese because Reese knows Tim quite well and will definitely give a better introduction than I can. So over to Reese.
Perfect, thank you, Leah. So I know Tim through the Royal Academy of Engineering's Engineering Leadership Scholarship, which is an undergraduate scholarship for any engineering discipline. I would highly recommend anyone here looks into applying. That's how I met Tim, who, as Leah said, is an engineer, an entrepreneur, and is currently running, among other things, the structural exam. Just a quick plug for the ACE lecture next week with Jess Mill and Nick Wynn of Elliott Wood, which is on reinforced soils. Same time, and again, Claire Hogg will share an email with you on the day. So without any further ado, Tim, if you'd like to share your screen, take it away.
Yeah, let me just do that. Okay. Are you seeing the full screen right now?
Yep, look good to me.
Yeah, okay. Feel free to ask any questions you want along the way. I think because of the amount of people, by the way, I suggest using the chat feature, and maybe one of Rue, Leah, or Reese can just monitor the chat, and then then we'll kind of have a big round of discussion at the end. But okay, so it's a very flexible 35 minutes for the presentation, but the Q&A I think is actually the more interesting part because I think that's where most people would want to know. But I'll probably be brief about why become a chartered engineer, because I think this is quite a self-selecting group. If you're here, you're probably interested or even know about the benefits of being a chartered engineer. The main thing is, how long does it take? Because I think that's a mystery in itself for a lot of people. And also actually choosing the right institution. This can actually make quite a big difference towards your complete timeline. And then also how to speed things up. So kind of from a kind of broader perspective, also just very practical tips along the way. So firstly, who am I? I've got a lot of letters before and after my name, so I don't tend to use them very often because my name is really short. Most people can't actually tell where my name begins and ends. But so I am a chartered engineer, chartered mechanical engineer, civil engineer, and with the IET. So they're the electrical engineers as well. But I'm not that proficient in an electrical engineer, but they do accept civil engineers as well. So like most people here, but I don't think everyone here is, but I also studied at the University of Bath, graduated 10 years ago now, which makes me feel really old. But yeah, in that period of time, I've gone and done all sorts of crazy things, such as become a mechanical engineer. So I worked in ultrasonics research for a couple of years, then went off to work at Shell to be an offshore engineer. And since 2016, really, I've been kind of doing my own stuff. I decided the employment lifestyle wasn't for me. And amongst one of the things, I started the structural exam website with Ralph Pelly, who I think some of you are his students for this semester. But anyway, we started this website, and I'm going to call it the most popular third-party website about becoming a chartered engineer. It's unverified though, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But here's a quick preview of it. We basically go through all the different IStructE competences and just basically explaining what each competence wants and how to write it up. We've also got the civil engineering exam, which is more about the ICE side of things. And for a more kind of free-form side of things, both of these link to a forum, and we talk about just about anything there. In particular, how to tackle any specific questions of IStructE exams, or people ranting about how little progress they're making, and we try and help each other out. It's a free resource. And if you're particularly interested as well, if you have a Fiona Cobb book, the Structural Engineer's Pocket Book, I've got a full corrections list here as well. So that's probably a nice one for you to browse through. Just continuing on who I am. So yeah, I'm a reviewer. I'm an examiner for the Institution of Mechanical Engineers and the Institution of Civil Engineers. I tried to count up how many reviews I've done. I think I've done about 50 live reviews and 20 mock reviews. But I don't know, something like that. But I also teach people how to pass the IStructE exam, and even teach for the IStructE themselves. So I've been doing some courses for there as well. And some people, they're already chartered. They just enjoy the lessons. So props to them. Main thing I would say as well is I'm a mad advocate for having a really broad skill set in what you do. Transferable skills are so important, especially in the situation we face now, where people are being laid off and everything like that. It's become an even more competitive market. So you just want to make sure that your skills are sharp, but also your skills are broad. Why get chartered then? Firstly, recognition of competence. I think that's quite a good benefit in itself. You want to prove that you are a certain level or above, and it helps with your career progression. If you ever need to change jobs, it's quite difficult to find a senior level job in engineering, at least in the UK, unless you are chartered. Like, unless you're going to be like 50, 60 years old and have been working for 30 years, you're probably going to need chartership of some kind. Also, with the situation we're in now, you may want to be looking internationally as well. So if you ever want to go to Hong Kong or Australia, New Zealand, and places like that to work, just having a chartership itself makes applying for visas so much easier. And finally, you, on the whole, will get paid more. I think that's quite an important, incentive for a lot of people. How long does it take? It's one of those how long's a piece of string questions, but I will answer it. It's a lot will really depend on, well, these main four things: your discipline, mainly, and your skills and intelligence, just how quickly you're able to pick up new things. Your network around you. Don't underestimate the power of supervision. In two ways. One is the skill sets you learn out of someone, but also if you're stuck in a training scheme with a company, for instance, that could also, in some instances, hinder you, because they may kind of hold you back a little bit just so that you meet their demands rather than the demands of the engineering council. So I've put in this wildcard at the end: your luck. Things can just be things can turn around very quickly, and vice versa. So luck is just a very important part of anyone's career. But typically, IMechE is about 3 to 5 years after your MEng degree. This one is very rare amongst civil engineers, got to say. I don't know a single other civil engineer who's an IMechE member. I'm a bit of a wild card on that front. It's actually mainly for structural engineers. And talking of which, there's the IStructE. This one is probably the hardest you can possibly do, and this one has quite a broad range. I would say it's about 4 to 8 years, but there are people who get chartered with other institutions first and then try the IStructE, so that there's less pressure to pass the exam because you're already chartered. It doesn't matter which institution you get chartered with, just as long as you get chartered with one. ICE is about 4 to 6 years. They're a bit harder than IMechE, a bit easier than IStructE, and it's reflected in the pass rates as well. I think IMechE has around a 95% pass rate. ICE is about 75%, and IStructE is about 30%. Main things to note: don't think getting chartership is a race. It's a long, boring process, I've got to say, and it's easy to get caught in the trap of comparing yourself amongst your peers, your colleagues, etc. And also, it's very easy to fail the exam first time with any institution. Like even the IMechE, where the pass rate is so high, but if you're not treated, so if you're not trained under the right environment, you may develop a false sense of confidence. So main thing is you need to take the exam when you feel ready as well. Don't get pressured into it. Main deciding factors about which institution to choose. So obviously I've mentioned the different time scales for institutions, and that might be that might alone be a very big deciding factor for people. I know, especially in Hong Kong, where pay rises are aplenty after you get chartered, and things like your other parts of your remuneration get tripled and things like that. It's chartership is a huge thing, so that might already be a deciding factor. But things like whether your company has a training program, whether things like whether your degree is recognized by the institutions is a big thing. I know the ICE and IStructE and IMechE recognize the Bath civil engineering degree, and things like how much your employers and peers value the institution and chartership in general. I know at Shell they didn't value chartership a single bit, so they had absolutely no incentive to support chartership. But companies like Arup, Atkins, Bureau Happold, etc., where you're basically charged out according to whether you have chartership and the skills you have or time you have after chartership, that's a very big part to play in how fast or how much pressure the employer puts on you. I've touched on this one. ICE has a very hard interview plus a 2-hour essay. It's a bit of a ball ache, but anyway, 2 hour, no design exam. It's just a very hard interview. Well, pretty hard. I won't say very hard. IStructE, the interview is easier, but obviously a very hard exam. And the main thing is you can always switch between institutions. So I've got multiple institutions, but I'm free to cancel any institution I want. I can join as many institutions as I want, etc. Okay, how to speed things up then? So the crux of this presentation. This is the UK-SPEC. You've got 5 competencies that you need to satisfy for any institution. So all institutions must have some criteria to measure these 5 competencies, and institutions need to meet a minimum level but can go above that. And so the ICE takes this to the extreme and says you have to be really competent in all of these plus more, whereas the IMechE says, okay, you need to be skilled at 3 of them and a little less skilled at 2 of them. It doesn't matter which, as long as you meet that level. So this is the main thing. You're trying to satisfy UK-SPEC now, and then the institutions kind of rewrite this according to their own headings. What I would say is, because I don't know what the backgrounds of everyone here is, but some of you I think are already working or in placement years, and some of you are students. Anyway, while you're at university, you're probably obviously going to be improving competence A, your technical knowledge. B, I guess you're helping that along, but you're very unlikely to be developing commercial skills for C. But I would definitely say, if you can, make a head start on competence D and E as much as you can. So communication and interpersonal skills are things like your writing ability, your creative writing, your factual writing, arguments, opinions, kind of persuasive skills. Professional commitment, things like whether you're participating in institution events, whether you are upholding the image of the profession and your ethical behavior, things like that. So this is one. Definitely D&D, you can make a start for it, especially if you are on a work placement. Don't underestimate that, because D&D count just as much towards your chartership. And start now. Always, like, the best time to start for chartership was 3 years ago for everyone, but the second best time is now. Document everything you learn, and especially if you are a student or a new graduate right now, the habits and everything that you develop now will just shape your career for the next 30, 40 years. The other thing is you need to build up the right network of contacts. The people around you are very, very important. You need to constantly feel challenged by the people around you, and you need to have people who are willing to push you every step of the way. Then the other thing is when you write up your documents, your evidences, I would suggest using the STAR method. Now, the STAR method, some of you may have heard of this. It's the situation, task, action, result. It's 4 headings. Be as specific as you can regarding this, because it's very possible to just forget. It's especially the situation and the task. This is the thing that will kind of help you, especially the final stages of your chartership application. Most people will find that they what's the word? They just get dragged down with the application because they need to write up about 4 years of history, and especially like if you're writing up 4 years behind or 4 years past, you just don't seem to remember the details as well or as vividly. So always be able to write everything you do as you go along, because then by the time you actually do apply, it's becomes more like a copy and paste situation. I think this is probably one of the biggest delays for a lot of people. It's just the actual application is a real annoyance more than anything else. This is also really good for your CVs for if you're applying for any job, by the way. So I've given an example here. Your concrete beams were overstressed by 15%. I need to increase the section size, but without increasing embedded CO2 levels. But then I found a new aggregate, or I used a different material grade, or I used a different cementitious material, and no CO2 increase. Fantastic. And then we also saved £10,000 in the process. This is really good evidence that the examiners want to see. It's it really, if you can describe it as vividly as I did there, it invites the examiners also to ask questions such as, okay, so what other aggregates or what other cementitious materials did you consider? And that's actually quite a typical question. They would change one parameter in your interview. So what if this were overstressed by 35% instead of 15%? What differences would there have been? These are all very typical interview questions. I've actually gone through my slides a lot faster than I thought I would, so the discussion might have to be a bit longer. Anyway, so record everything you learn and do. This is the other thing, CPD, continuous professional development. So you are required, you are mandated to demonstrate at least 180 hours before you sit your CEng review. That's for the ICE. IStructE are a bit looser with that. And IMechE, I don't think I've ever seen a full CPD history. You just have to state what you plan to do in the future. But ICE are extremely strict about this. 180 hours. You definitely need to be updating it frequently, because this is another thing that us reviewers look at. If you don't know what CPD is, it's a record of what you plan to do in the future and simultaneously what you have done in the recent past. So, for instance, me presenting this thing to you, I'm learning a little bit out of it. So I'm recording probably half an hour or 1 hour of CPD to this. And every year, after you get chartered as well, you have to maintain at least 30 hours of CPD. This one is a real headache to do. This is why I absolutely recommend you get cracking on it now, even as a student, and update it at least once a quarter. It takes about 1 or 2 hours, so a Saturday morning or something like that. But especially if you're working, I think, and if you have like a timesheet system as well, it's actually quite useful to be able to do it as you do the timesheets. And actually, that's the way I did it, and I think it really helps. So just whenever you do your timesheets, typically on a Friday afternoon, just spend an extra 5 minutes filling in one extra Google Sheets or Excel row to say what you've learned that week. And sometimes you see companies or training providers do something like a CPD approved stamp or something. There's no such thing as CPD approved. It's just whatever you learn, and a CPD to me, I might be learning, let's say, how to edit images for purposes of promotional materials. But if you've already learned it and you know how to do it, then that's not CPD to you. So CPD is very specific to an individual, and you need to document as you go along. I highly recommend this template in this link, and I've given the QR code. If you happen to have a smartphone with you, just take a picture of this. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to be giving all the slides to this as well to Leah and Rue, so they can distribute this to you afterwards as well. Okay, practical tips. Okay, first thing I would say, with the pandemic, there has actually been no better time in history to make progress on your chartership and your CPD in particular. Now that because of COVID-19, everything is now online, and a lot of institutions previously were charging for a lot of online material. They've made it free completely now, so you can rack up as much CPD hours as you need, all for free and all from the comfort of your living room or your bedroom, whatever. And so I've been making the most of it. I've probably racked up 120 hours this year, and bear in mind you need only 30 hours, so it's fantastic. I highly recommend just logging into the institution websites. So I've just taken 2 events out of the ICE page which looked interesting, such as the London Graduate and Student Annual General Meeting. So I don't know what they do, but I'm going to drop in and see what they do. And also this one, algorithmic design and automated construction. So those are going to be an hour long each, so another 2 hours of CPD. Fantastic, easy peasy. And the other one is you don't need to be based anywhere near these regions as well. So I may, for instance, dial into an Australia or a New Zealand webinar about earthquakes, because I don't know too much about earthquakes, and that's a fantastic item to have there. Be curious, just keep looking around, digging around, and especially YouTube. YouTube has been fantastic for just learning. The amount of free material going up on YouTube every day, maybe I give my age away a bit here, but I didn't even have YouTube at university, so it's just amazing how things have changed. I've put this page up. This is a plug to my own channel. I've only just started it during COVID, like a lot of other educators. I've got lots of videos there. These are probably like, I don't know, first or second year university things, but click and subscribe if you can. And yeah, YouTube, there's a whole host of material out there for all different skill levels as well, and also dig around for things outside your core competencies and your subject. So for instance, I think most of you are going to be civil engineers, so look up things like mechanical engineering or very basic electrical engineering. These are all very useful skills that do apply in civil engineering, and you also don't know whether it will apply to you in the future, so it's good to learn it now. I think one of the best things for most people is to get student membership, because the ICE and IStructE give it to you for free. Other institutions don't, which I think is a bit stingy, but ICE and IStructE give it to you for free. Presumably they make it back through exam fees. So just click on these links or just Google ICE student membership and you'll find it. It's free. The key benefit of that is there are a huge amount, insane amount of ebooks that you can read for free, and probably via your university logins as well. Yeah, okay, well, I mean, I don't have a university login, so I rely on this a lot, but just about every book you can think of which you will need, or so may not be books, but just topics that you need, you can find online. Just for instance, just log into the libraries and you click on the read online or the download book button on the left, and I've just brought up a few books here, but I think especially if you're doing one of these design projects, and I think you're doing a refurbishment of a turbine hall or something like that, so just look up refurbishment of the Tate Modern, where they had to refurbish a turbine hall and things like that. You can find so much information, and also the librarians in the institutions, they're there to serve you, so contact them and ask them to look up an article about refurbishment of turbine halls, and they'll dig around and post these articles and books to you, all like inclusive of your membership, and because you're a student, it's free. So huge amounts of resources available to you there. This is the final slide. So basically, if you're starting any internship, and in particular, I think you do thick sandwiches now, so maybe 2 years of studying, 1 year of internship, and 2 years of studying. So like that's a fantastic time to record a lot of evidences. There's what I would say is, because most employers are going to be subscribed to like the ICE training scheme or follow the IStructE path, what I would say is don't write it against any particular institution. Write it specifically against the UK-SPEC, which is the Engineering Council criteria, because what you can do after you've written against UK-SPEC is you can just copy and paste into the correct institution format, whereas it's much more difficult in reverse. So the other thing is, in particular, if you're in a situation where you're applying for jobs, especially if you're a graduate engineer or you've got a little bit of experience but are looking to change employers, don't worry too much about salary. Always choose, well, not always, but for the majority of the time, it will pay off to choose a job based on the size of their training budget and how much you will learn, because that is a huge springboard for the rest of your career going forwards. I've got so many opinions about how to choose jobs and things like that, so feel free to ask me about that. Also, feel free to use our forum, the Structural Exam, forum.thestructuralexam.com. Discuss any topics. We discuss technical things in there as well. So we've discussed things like wind loading, geotech, soil investigations, and all sorts of things like that. So feel free to ask any topics you want in there. It's all free. We do charge for ebooks that you can buy later on down the line, but that's like right at the end of your whole process. We make as much as we can. We put as much information as we can for free for all of you, and I think at this stage for everyone here, it's all the free material. Okay, so that's actually the end of my slide pack. That's gone a bit quicker than I thought, but I'm sticking around for as many questions as you want.
My first question, Tim.
Okay.
Is it possible to get chartered off the back of a BEng, or do you know people who've done a BEng and then maybe gone back a bit later in life and done a master's and then got chartered?
Yeah, so the chartership is obviously MEng helps. People get chartered without a degree of any kind. So the competencies I mentioned, so that's this UK-SPEC one here. These are written, so there are obviously sub-competencies, and sorry about the noise. Yeah, so definitely a BEng is possible. You may find it helpful to do an MSc after the BEng, but for BEng, definitely you may have to take some kind of supplementary exam. I know the ICE have just either last year or this year created a new exam specifically for those who have got an accredited BEng degree, because as part of being chartered, you need to demonstrate master's level knowledge, and getting an MEng degree is obviously that. But bear in mind, these competencies are written for all people of all backgrounds. So there are a lot of people who leave school at GCSE level and don't have a degree of any kind, but they still need to demonstrate master's level learning. So it's definitely possible to be chartered with a BEng, but it's much more streamlined if you do have an MEng.
Thank you. My next question was, obviously I'm in third year, so I've done a placement now, and I know I know a little bit about chartership. Would you be able to go? I think most people would find this useful, into the cost aspect of it. You know, how much the exam cost? Do you expect your employer to pay for it? And sort of, I suppose, what salary you might expect after getting chartered?
The salary aspect's quite difficult, but I'll say what I know. IStructE and ICE have graduate memberships of around, let's say, between 150 to 200 pounds per year. Now, almost every employer I know does pay for the subscription of at least one institution, but normally it's maximum of one institution. Now, if you do subscribe to more than one institution, the membership fees are tax deductible. So depending on your income tax rates, you'll save between 20 and 45% of the membership fees. So IMechE, the reason I promote IMechE so much is because it's the cheapest by far, and it's also the easiest. So why not do it? IMechE, to apply for chartership, so I think the exam is just like £100 or £110. It's a 45-minute interview, and that's kind of it. The ICE is £300 for the exam itself, and probably a whole load more for things along the way. It's 300 or more pounds. There are discounts, by the way, if you are a low earner. Each institution sets a different threshold for the kind of subsidized rates. IStructE is the big one. So you've got the graduate memberships, which also depends on age. They change the subscription rate based on age. Oh, sorry, it's not age. It's how many years after university, because they're not allowed to specifically peg it against age. But so IStructE, the interview. So there are two parts to the IStructE. You've got an interview and a written exam. The interview is around £200. And this is, but bear in mind, this is all if you just pass first time. You might have to retake. So, interview is about £200, and then the exam is about £500. And bear in mind, a lot of people will be taking the exam 2 to 4 times before they pass. So that's that's how much it is with the IStructE. It's a very expensive process, but employers usually will pay for one lot of exams for you. It's in their interest. So yeah, definitely think about that.
Definitely worth it in the long run. We've got a question from Jason in the chat. It says, so with institution events, can you watch 180 hours of that and have enough to satisfy the CPD quota? Can you elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So you can't just watch 180 hours and call it quits. You have to do. So every year you have to set your targets for the kind of following year, and they have to be relatively broad. You can't just watch ICE events for 180 hours. You need to demonstrate you're hitting different UK-SPEC thing. Where is it? I can't see it now. Here. At least to get chartered anyway, you need to be doing something like which kind of touches upon these things. So very broadly, you want to be hitting around 30 to 40 hours per UK-SPEC competence, but that does depend a lot on your job role as well. So for instance, if you are let's say a design consultant, you're probably going to be doing UK-SPEC A and B a lot more than C, and conversely, if you are in project management or if you're working as a client instead of as a consultant, you might be trying to do more of C than A and B. So you can't do 180 hours of just institutions. But also bear in mind, the CPD doesn't have to be specifically about UK-SPEC as well. Like, because the chartership, you're meant to be taking the exam in English, but you can record a small amount of CPD. For instance, if you want to study French or Italian, obviously you can't do 180 hours on that because it's not entirely relevant to the UK-SPEC. But there's nothing to stop you to record things which you think are going to be beneficial for your career. And also, I've got to say also, UK-SPEC professional commitment. One of those is the fact that you have recorded CPD to a sufficient level, and you will maintain CPD going forward. So if you can't demonstrate that you've done that, then there is no way you will pass chartership. So this is an absolute non-negotiable.
Sorry, I was on mute. We've got another question from Sahil. I've heard of IPD, initial professional development. Is it similar to CPD, and can it count towards chartership?
So IPD is everything you learn until chartership. CPD is what you maintain as a kind of learning as you qualify and for the rest of your career. So IPD encompasses everything, including CPD. So IPD is your whole training and everything leading up to chartership. So I don't know. I feel like that answers the question, but let me know if it doesn't.
I think it does. Got a couple more questions from Daria. Hi, I just switched from first year architecture to civil engineering, so I don't know that much. Do you think that what university you've gone to matters in your chartership exam? Would going to university in Oxbridge be beneficial over, I don't know, Bath or Durham?
No, not in the slightest. Not for chartership. It may make a difference to whether an employer wants to hire you or not, but for the purposes of chartership, no. The only way it matters really is if it's an accredited degree or if it's not an accredited degree. And I think, as far as I can tell, I think Tim Lai is the head of the Joint Board of Moderators who audits all of these degrees. So I'm certain to say that Bath is a accredited degree. What I would say is degree. So, for instance, I do know Oxbridge has a kind of a more general 2 years to begin with, and then specializes later. So that may, for instance, change the balance of what you know between A, B, C, D, E here. They may know more about commercial than you do, but at the end, like by the time you're chartered, there's a lot of skills on top of what you actually learn in university that you need to add to it. So, for instance, I doubt you'll be learning things like NEC4 standard forms of contract. You may hear about it in third or fourth year at Bath. I certainly did. It was NEC3 then, but I don't suspect that people will be signing contracts at university. But for commercial skills, you need to have good knowledge and be practicing it. So things like having your signature on a contract, or your signature as a purchase order, or things like being the checker of technical drawings or the approver, things like that. And then that's not really a university thing at all.
Jacob asked, what percentage of graduates would you say actually apply for chartership, and then what percentage actually get chartered? Would you say most of your cohort have gone through the chartership process?
Yeah, those who've stuck around in engineering, a lot have ended up in finance. So yeah, those who have stuck around in engineering of some kind and have worked in the UK or a country where it is recognised. I think by now, just about everyone in my graduating year is chartered. The only people I can think of who might not be chartered are those working in academia, although there are routes for you to get chartered in academia as well. They're a bit different, which I haven't covered here, but so the percentage of graduates, yeah, it will be close to 100%. It's let's say so what was the second half of that question, Leah?
Hang on, I made up the second half. What actually? Oh, the second half of the question was if any of your colleagues have tried for chartership, not got it, and sort of given up.
I can think of only one, but I think that's quite a special case where this person started off in a country where chartership was very much required. So started off in Hong Kong, but then moved to Germany, and they don't really care about it there. So um, that is a very specific case, and that's definitely not normal. What I would say is it's always possible to get chartered and then just either renounce it or not use it afterwards, whereas it's a lot more difficult to kind of work in engineering and then leave engineering and then try and apply for chartership afterwards. Chartership is about maintaining and also demonstrating the relevance of your skills now. So, for instance, even if an engineering manager is 30 years experienced, if they're not able to, for instance, draw bending moment diagrams, they probably wouldn't actually be able to get chartered right now. So that's the reality of being chartered. You have to show the relevance of your skills.
Thank you. Ollie asked, can you transfer chartership from one institution to another? I.e., even though I want to be a chartered structural engineer, can I focus my effort on the ICE exam and then transfer to the IStructE? I.e., maybe you could do the easier exam first and then go for the harder exam?
And that's exactly what I suggest everyone does. IStructE is a very specific exception, though. So between IMechE, IET, ICE, and just about every other institution you can, IStructE is slightly different because there are two components to the chartership. One is an interview and one is the exam, the written exam. If you get chartered with any of the like ICE, IMechE, it exempts you from the interview part, but it does not exempt you from the written exam. So there is a set procedure for this, and it's extremely common for people to do ICE first and then the IStructE. I suspect like nearly all of the IStructE exam takers who are already chartered are from the ICE. But specifically, if you're a structural engineer, do look at IMechE because I think it's a lot more relevant than you may think, and that's the route that I went.
Thank you. Jacob asked again, is there a frequent professional review once chartered, or I suppose, is there another step after chartership, or is there anything you have to do to maintain your chartership?
Okay, so professional review after chartership, currently no, but it is in the pipelines of being discussed and things like that. So don't be surprised if at some point in your career they have refresher exams. The CPD basically serves that purpose now. You are audited, and actually the Engineering Council has just within the last 2 or 3 years brought about mandatory audits of your CPD records. And if you don't pass your CPD record, your chartership is prone to being revoked, and people have had that happen to them. So your CPD is your evidence and documentation that you are learning and keeping your skills relevant. But I do know countries like Canada and Australia, so maybe not Canada, but definitely Australia, you have to take a refresher exam every few years.
Is that something you have to pay for again? Do you
Probably.
know?
I don't know about Australia, unfortunately.
I think a final question to me from me was, do you think current graduates, maybe graduates who are in their first or second year of being in a graduate scheme, do you think the coronavirus situation, people who are working from home, do you think that will be detrimental for them gathering the skills that they need to go about their chartership? Or do you think that there are some cons and pros?
Personally, no. I don't think it's detrimental. What I would say is, if I go back to that UK-SPEC, I've lost it now. So this lot here, it's as good a time as any to pick up your technical skills. Interpersonal, it's actually interesting because digital environment has obviously taken off in the last 10 to 30 years. Yeah, or in the modern era. A lot of it. So when in my presentation I mentioned how training programs can hinder you. I specifically mentioned this if you have a mentor or a supervisor and you don't see eye to eye with this person regarding relevance of a skill. So, for instance, let's take an example from my book. I do or did a lot of programming, and I know 7 years ago when I was doing chartership, it was not really recognized as a skill relevant to ICE, for instance, which I thought was total bollocks. iMechie was a bit more okay with it, but that's actually specific to your supervisor, because at the end of the day, you need to convince your interviewers in the room that it's relevant, and absolutely no problem with my iMechie reviewers. ICE did give me a lot more grief regarding that, but I've resolved that. So definitely. So what's the question again? So.
Is working in a COVID environment or working online more difficult?
I would say if you can somehow think of how your skills are relevant to becoming a complete professional engineer. So I deliberately keep that vague. I think it's very much. I don't think it will hinder you at all. Obviously, things will be a little bit different, but there is absolutely no, for instance, no impact on professional commitment. You either are a committed professional or not. Commercial skills, I think now is an even better time for it, actually, because you're dealing with things like transaction security or data security, things like that. So C and E are definitely impacted on that. Communication, wow, like everyone is dealing with written communication a lot more now than when I was starting out. If you need to make sure your drawings, your emails are clear and succinct, because everyone's probably receiving more emails and Slack or MS Teams messages than ever. So if you can write up your evidence on how you're able to improve your communication skills, then definitely treat this as the best opportunity you may have for a long time, because this is in general I try to see the positives in everything, and if you had me as a reviewer and you were talking about it, I would absolutely pat you on the back for it, because it's making the best of a not so pleasant experience. But I think it's a great opportunity, definitely.
I think we'll wrap it up there, Tim, if that's all right with you.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's fine for me. So I'm
Leah, I think there's 2 more questions.
Oh, did I not see them?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, ask away if you need.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Ming asked regarding the first job. It seems it's always better to get in those industry-leading companies. What about small companies? In terms of size and background of a company, how do you think about these factors on picking a first job?
Yeah, I've been doing these interviews for about 5 years now. I have consistently been astounded, in a positive sense, by the people who actually join the small companies. They tend to pick up much more responsibility and commercial skills than the bigger companies, which follow a very strict regime regarding how you are able to move up the ladder. I think actually those who, well, they're not really outliers, but definitely the kind of the fast bunch of people tend to be from the small companies or the small medium companies, usually because they have to wear multiple hats. If you're working in a design practice of 5 people, then there's a lot more on your shoulders than if you're another cog in the works for Arup. So definitely don't think you're hindered at all for chartership if you're in a small company. If anything, I think it's a massive benefit regarding speed, but definitely the quality of your supervision is a lot more volatile and variable there, because you can more or less expect a certain level if you're working at Arup, but if it's a small employer, good luck. But I would say if you're going to go for a small employer, make sure the boss and the supervisors are all chartered, so that they have at least a better idea of what's expected for chartership.
A couple more questions. Daria asked, is there anything you would specifically stress for a first year student to start doing in order to get a head start? I suppose other than recording all your CPD.
Yeah, actually, did I mention it right at the end? So, okay, so aside from getting student memberships, join, for instance, the local networks. I do know that IStructE has a group in Bath. I think it's called the Tuesday group or the Young
There's,
Members group.
there's another one, ICE Bristol and Bath, graduates and students. That's with the
Fantastic.
ICE, yeah.
Yeah. Make connections with your colleagues at other universities as well. So make connections with Bristol University and the other one at Bristol. Forgotten what it's called. Sorry, UE. Make connections with them. Also, other universities like Southampton. They're not that far away. Yeah, and there are also like lots of people up and down the country as well who they may just want to know a little bit about Bath, and you may want to know about them. So just make contacts with, I don't know, Edinburgh or even other countries if you so wish. But definitely, if you can, attend as many of these webinars or kind of online seminars. Now, I do know the ICE has a new president coming in within the next 2 weeks, I would say. And it's actually the youngest ever president. So it's also like the second female president ever. So it's definitely a fascinating. It's going to be a fascinating watch. Attend those because then the president will talk about the current situation and the current challenges civil engineers face, not just in the broader economy, but things like climate change, things like that. So you can also find out about different industry schemes. And the other thing is, a lot of these institutions are handing out scholarships and free bursaries, like left, right, centre. So there's a lot of money you can actually just take out these institutions if you just dig around. So definitely for first year university, do things like that. Also, do things like emailing your professors or email the professors, just be curious about what they're researching and speak to for instance, their PhD students. And just find out what the different research centres in the university or surrounding universities are doing. I think first year definitely is a year where you should be making as many contacts as you can. Contacts, networking. It's not a very common thing for people to hear, but definitely network as much as you can.
Nicolay asks whether international experience counts towards the 4 to 8 years of experience required.
Yeah, why wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's I don't understand. Like bending moments still the same in Australia or here, so
they're just upside down in Australia.
True that. Well, it definitely, and also like what I would say, because I actually worked abroad. My entire postgraduate career has actually been outside the UK, so it's very definitely possible to get chartered with international experience. What I would say is actually that really helps with things like interpersonal skills. In particular, if you're working in a culture where things are quite different to the British culture. Now, I'll take the Netherlands as an example because that's what I know best. They speak in a very direct manner. So at least in British culture, we're very polite. We kind of circumvent what we actually want to say, whereas it's very typical Dutch culture just to go straight to the point. And it may sound offensive if you're not expecting it, but that's just the culture. So just developing and reflecting upon how you communicate with other cultures definitely is useful. And what I would say also, the UK-SPEC is specifically written so that it's not jurisdiction specific. So commercial skills, for instance, if you've never worked in the UK in your whole life and you're not expecting to work in the UK, they may not expect you to know about corporate tax, VAT, NEC4 contracts, things that the UK typically uses, whereas you may be asked more about a lot about the Dubai codes of commercial codes of practice, etc. So definitely international experience 100% counts for it. And actually I probably should do a lot of myth busting as well, because I hear this a lot from typically from graduates of big companies actually. There's no such thing as well, what's the one? The one I want to mention was a lot of people think that experience that you gain in your internships doesn't count for chartership, which is utter nonsense. If you're learning and you're improving your skills, it counts. It doesn't matter what stage of your life you're at. If you're learning and improving, it counts. CPD, definitely hit a minimum of 60 hours per year if you can, and if you can do more, fantastic. What other Mythbusters did I have in mind? I think things like it's just a lot of it's a lot of kind of procedural things, like you can't do this because of some nonsense reason. Like the main thing is if you're learning, then it counts.
Jacob asks, is it possible to see an example or part of an example of a chartership application in order to understand the format? Now, I know that IStructE does, like, they put the past papers up, and they put the answers up. But I suppose in terms of the interview,
yeah, what I would suggest everyone to do is type in, just Google ICE example attribute, and you'll come across one of our websites. And it's basically that S.T.A.R format that I've got. Now, where is it? The S.T.A.R format, which I had somewhere here. Your report, at least for IStructE, is just like 30 or 50 of these. It's just a lot of paragraphs of, this was the problem, this is what I proposed, here's the solution. And typically a lot more pictures pointing to things. ICE is a bit more broad, whereas the S.T.A.R you need to talk about things like commercial aspects as well. So for instance, I'll give you another example. Situation, the contractors were 3 weeks late, and we had a time critical thing coming in 2 weeks time. So what do you do? Task, I needed to resolve that. Action, I organized a temporary storage area for people for this thing to be delivered, and I organized for an external lifting contractor to do it after the extra week's delay, in tandem with getting the contractors to speed up. And so I got a 3 week delay down to a 2.5 week delay, which in civil engineering terms is a lot of money. So that's basically what a chartership report looks like, but just, about 30 or 50 of these. IStructE exam, yeah, definitely just look up a typical IStructE exam online. If you actually go to my YouTube channel, I've done 2 live streams where I've actually solved IStructE exam problems. So a full exam is actually 7 hours. So I did it in 4 hours. So I didn't do the full paper, but that's more or less, you can see the thought process, the difficulty level. But I've got to say, like, if you studied in a UK university and you're working in the UK environment, IStructE exam or any chartership exam should be very doable for most people. You just need a lot more experience. The other thing I would say is don't make decisions based on just 1 or 2 parameters. You need to think very holistically and broadly about something. So, for instance, something may not be the cheapest. Like, let's say delivering a project, it may not be the cheapest method, but you can pay more, but be more sustainable and deliver a bit faster. And that is a situation example of balancing multiple parameters and making a decision based on that.
Thank you, Tim. It's been really useful for me, and I'm sure probably more useful if I'd had this in my first or second year. You said you'll send the slides over, right? And we can share them out. Claire can share them out, or we can share them on our Facebook. And we've been recording this, so Tim, we can send this to you. And we've been putting our lectures on Panopto or review. So we'll send you we'll post the link to that on our Facebook. I suppose just left to say thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you want, just drop me an email, tim@thestructuralexam.com, if you have any questions. But the best place to actually put the questions is forum.thestructuralexam.com. If it's a question that a lot of people can can get the answers to, then yeah, that's a great place. And more likely is that someone's already asked it and it's already there. So dig around. Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks everyone.